GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder, and welcome. We're going right down to the University of Virginia. Jennifer Lawless, chair of the Political Science Department, joins us today. Professor, thanks so much.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Are you playing on your TikTok app on your phone? Because last night the United States Senate unanimously voted to ban TikTok as an app on government-owned phones and computers, and that now goes over to the House. What's your thought on this issue, which has been kind of a bit of the lightning rod? It was during the Trump administration. A number of very hawkish Republicans are out front on this. Talk about your thoughts.
Well, first I should note that I don't have TikTok. I also no longer have Twitter. So I'm not a TikTok professional over here. From a policy perspective, you know, it's virtually impossible to get everybody in the Senate to agree on anything. So the fact that this was a unanimous decision suggests that, I mean, it's insane that there were not legislative interventions earlier. We know that there are threats. We know that this is there are national security risks. I think that this is the smart move. Whether the House is going to pass it is another question, but it just seems to me to be the appropriate outcome.
Our friend in the crypto world, Mr. Bankman, as Stephen Colbert calls him, didn't they catch on when his name was Bankman Fraud? Bankman-Fried was arrested, I believe, Wednesday by police in the Bahamas. He's going to be extradited back to the United States. The Southern District of New York, the SEC, and other federal agencies have levied charges against him. And then the news comes out that the totality of his political donations, Democrats got about $40 million. In direct donations, Republicans only get about $300,000 as individual contributions, but then it looks like another maybe $30 million in dark money was funneled to Republican lawmakers. What does this say about the state of our nation?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it highlights yet one more way in which technology regulations are at the forefront, and the U.S. government needs to figure out what to do. I read a piece this morning indicating that, you know, he's probably going to try and get extradited as quickly as he possibly can because prison in the Bahamas is not an appealing place to be. But, you know, his opening statement to the congressional committee where he was planning to testify was released, and his opening line was like, "I effed up." So, you know, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars. You're talking about, trying to fundamentally affect the technological landscape. You're bankrupting tons of people, and you can't just say, "I effed up." So, you know, I think that this is generally yet one more indication that the federal government has a responsibility to begin to think about regulation in a new technological environment and to do it quickly.
During the technology hearings chaired in the subcommittee of judiciary by David Cicilline, it was on the anti-competitive nature of the major tech companies. I want to say it was 2 years ago. Steve Peoples, who used to be at the Providence Journal, wrote for us for a little bit, is at AP, was live tweeting the ages of the members of the committee who were asking these tech giants questions, both in the House and the Senate. And, you know, the ages were 73, 82, 197. Is this an absolute fundamental problem of what our members of Congress, who they are, how old they are, how disconnected they are, to understanding basic things like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, etc.?
I mean, I remember watching some of that, and, you know, you'd have a member come up and be like, "And so what is the Facebook," right? Like, this is not, it underscored a disconnect. But I think that the broader issues are not necessarily specific to these technology companies. So if you have concerns about antitrust, if you have concerns about monopoly power, if you have concerns about, deregulation in general, I don't know that you have to be an expert on the intricacies of TikTok or LinkedIn or Facebook to
Right.
be able to ask your broader questions. I think it highlighted sort of poor staffing in that a lot of these members didn't understand the lingo or how to talk about the industries they were or the specific companies they were interested in regulating within this broader industry. But I also think that a lot has changed even in 2 years, and there needs to be far more government intervention.
Um, GoLocal quit Twitter 4 years ago. On December 26th will be our 4-year anniversary. You recently exited Twitter. Do you get any sense of what the fate of Twitter is? Just, they're so prevalent in certain spheres, right? Politics, hard news, entertainment. Many younger users have shifted to Instagram and to TikTok, so it is not the popular cool place to hang out if you're a 23-year-old or a 17-year-old. Where are we going with this, and what does Elon Musk's actions, effort to control it, say about sort of the body politic?
Well, I would say a couple of things. The first is that if this was 2 or 3 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, and Elon Musk bought Twitter and engaged in this kind of behavior, I think that people would have far less flexibility to quit Twitter than they do now. I mean, within a matter of minutes, new outlets like Mastodon and Post Social came up. It's unclear how well they're going to work. It's unclear how many people are going to ultimately spend all of their social media time there. But the ease with which you can see a proliferation of alternative outlets has made it easier, I think, for a lot of people to say, I'm not going to put up with what he's doing on Twitter. The second thing is, he has demonstrated, I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla is the next big company to fall, just because he's demonstrated that he's not who a lot of people thought that he was. I think he was seen as this sort of quirky billionaire who was either apolitical or nonpartisan or just sort of strangely aligned with various views on both sides of the aisle. And that's certainly not the case. I mean, he's taken down Fauci, he's mocked pronoun usage, he's told people to vote Republican, he has allowed tons of people who are explicitly racist and anti-Semitic and disseminating misinformation about key topics to rejoin the platform. And he's fired half the staff. So, I don't see a warm welcome for him among the general population. Twitter could very well become what Donald Trump wanted Truth Social to be.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We don't use it. I probably check it. I follow almost no one, and almost no one follows me. I've got the perfect model. But I've noticed in my feed when I do check it, two things. One, the number of ads have just disappeared. I mean, major brands want no association with this at all. And then the second thing is that, which never happened before, because I do follow some national news organizations, but I'm now seeing Tucker Carlson, who I don't follow. I don't think I follow Fox News, but I see this proliferation of of center content now flooding into my feed on Twitter, and that has to be an algorithm manipulation, just a real push and change by Musk and his new team.
That's what it seems to be like. And I mean, the question that I have is, what does Donald Trump think about this? Because when he was thrown off of Twitter, when he created Truth Social, he was basically trying to create what Elon Musk was able to create in 5 seconds, right? Yeah. So, whether there's tension there is something that's somewhat interesting. But I do think that journalists used Twitter as a way to get additional information, to communicate with politicians. There are lots of other ways for them to do that. So the public good that was provided by Twitter, at least as far as the dissemination of information is concerned, seems like there are a lot of different places where it can go. So I'm not that worried about, sort of the anti-democratic emergence of the new platform, just because there are so many alternative venues.
You brought up Donald Trump. Let's talk about two national polls and one significant regional poll have showed DeSantis ahead of Donald Trump. Just, I don't want to say 60 days ago, 45 days ago, Trump was still, far, far ahead of DeSantis in similar types of polling. Have we, no one stuck the silver stake in his heart, but are we seeing Republicans really moving away from Donald Trump and really minimizing the chances of Trump being able to win this upcoming Republican presidential primary?
Well, look, first of all, the polls indicated that about 60% of people would prefer that Trump not be the nominee. Roughly 60% of people also would prefer that Biden not be the nominee. The difference is that if Trump's the nominee, only 2/3 of Republicans say that they would support him, whereas about 80% of Democrats say that they would support Biden. But what this means is that there's definitely a willingness among Republican voters to entertain somebody new. The reality, though, is that they're not going to face a decision right now or even in the near future that just pits Donald Trump against Ron DeSantis. Other potential candidates look at these numbers and realize that they also could tap into the willingness among Republican voters to choose somebody else. And as crowded a field there is, advantage is Donald Trump. So, we haven't seen Donald Trump in the last several weeks. If I were giving him advice, I would say call every Republican you possibly can and encourage that person to run for president, because that's his path to the nomination once again.
Will he have his close friends all
feel
run?
Good about where he is, but it's not a realistic poll at this point.
Will he have all his friends run as sort of stalking horses? Lindsey Graham's going to run, and Kanye's going to run, and yeah, Jared Kushner's going to run. Okay, Joe Biden is how old is he now? 79? Is he 80 yet?
He's 80.
He's 80 years old. So in some short period of time,
he's a young 80.
He's a young 80. That's what I always like to say about Joe Biden. That he could be an old 84 or 85 or 86 type of situation. Let's go to Joe Biden and walk through the scenarios. It's close to the end of his second year in term of his 4-year term. He's got some major decisions to make. He needs to make them in short order to be fair to the rest of the Democratic Party. How do you think this rolls out over the next few months?
Well, everything suggests that he's planning on seeking re-election. He hasn't confirmed it, but he certainly hasn't denied it. He said that his plan is to do that. He just has to have some additional conversations with his family, which I expect he'll be having, over the holidays and in January and February. It's clear that they're already running against Donald Trump. And I think that the general sense is that if he's the nominee, no one will seriously challenge him. The fact that, this poll came out yesterday saying that 80% of Democrats at this point would vote for him if he were the nominee, highlights that people are okay with it. They might prefer somebody else, but they're not going to fight to knock out the incumbent president. And frankly, the change in the primary schedule and moving South Carolina to the front is a huge advantage for him as well. So even if somebody did want to challenge him, it's hard to see how he wouldn't, within the first couple of contests, be the presumptive nominee. So, it's his choice. And if he wants to run, it looks like he's going to get as much support as he had among voters in 2020.
So there's a potential nightmare situation, though, for Democrats. Joe Biden says he's going to run again. And it's not Trump, and it's DeSantis, younger, more aggressive, doesn't have the negatives, has a lot of positives, seems like a change agent, rejects wokeism, which is a vulnerability of the Democratic Party in a general election. How does that work out for the Democrats?
There's no question that the Biden administration is polling that, right? The Biden campaign is polling that. And they are not only going to decide that he's going to run if Trump is the nominee. There's got to be a path to victory regardless of who the nominee is. And if you look at some of the most recent polling, when you look at how the Democrats did in the suburbs, when you look at how the Democrats were doing among young voters in 2020 and in 2022, there are opportunities to really encourage Democratic and independent-leaning Democrats to turn out to vote in a way where you don't necessarily have to convert Republicans away from Ron DeSantis. So, this is not, he's got to have multiple paths to the presidency, not just taking on Donald Trump. But at this point, Donald Trump does seem like a very still solid bet as far as a potential nominee is concerned. Now, I have said all along, and I still believe it, I think it's unlikely that he'll be the nominee because I think he will be indicted. But who knows?
But let's just go to DeSantis for a second. Here's DeSantis. Florida's been historically a purple state, and he has a very viable former congressman, governor, was the attorney general too in there, in the Democratic nominee, and he blows him out by 20%. This is a concerning issue for Democrats, which is, oh God, we can never win Florida, but it also says, listen, on these independent voters, DeSantis is very, very attractive, and he's going to be attractive to, independents in Arizona and Nevada and Colorado and all those swing states, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and you can just.
So I'm less. I'm less. I don't necessarily agree with that. First of all, Charlie Crist was a Republican, then an independent, then a Democrat. He was not the typical Democratic challenger running against Ron DeSantis. Second, he had been governor. And if you look historically, most states do not reelect somebody who, after time left and then comes back. So in a lot of ways, Crist was not the best nominee. The other thing that I would note
is Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Mike Dukakis.
No. I'm not saying who lost. I'm not saying that somebody who lost and then came back and won. I'm saying somebody who was in power, left, and then came back to seek that position again. And we saw the same thing happen, right? Terry McAuliffe in Virginia is another example. Glenn Youngkin defeated him, despite the fact that McAuliffe had actually been a pretty popular governor just 4 years earlier. So no, I'm all for losing and trying again. It's different though when you held the position, you leave it, and then you try to come back because people like moving forward. But the other thing that I would note is that Ron DeSantis had done a pretty decent job with the hurricane cleanup. He had been in the news. He had been demonstrating sort of a nonpartisan way of solving a big state problem. And that helped too. I don't know that that transfers nationally. And the final thing that I would say is the Biden campaign and Democrats nationally were not campaigning against Ron DeSantis. And so Ron DeSantis did not have to defend himself the way that he would if he was running nationally, or even frankly, the way he would if he was running in a Republican primary. Keep in mind that he is not he's mean. He's literally scooping up immigrants and dropping them at Martha's Vineyard and in front of the vice president's house. Like, people don't like mean people. And I think that that would be a big part of the campaign against him, that he lacks empathy, that he's mean-spirited. And I think that that's a legitimate liability with which he'd have to contend. It's not to say that he couldn't overcome it, but I don't think that there's this obvious path to victory for him.
I want to change subjects, kind of wrap up. I want to get your perspective on some of these historical kind of entities, the WPA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and the January 6th Committee. Any of them going to be making news in the next month? We expected big things out of January 6th. They told us there was going to be big things happening, and it seems to be a little bit of a whimper.
First of all, I just have to note that I remember when I used to walk in Cranston, in Edgewood, on some of the sidewalks, there were still literally the plaques that said, like, put here by the WPA. So,
and by the way, all in good shape, too. Those sidewalks.
No, I know. So it's a very live and thriving entity, as is the January 6th Committee. Look, they're going to speak to the American people on Monday in their last televised meeting. They're making the criminal referrals. The question now is just whether there's a criminal referral for Donald Trump. I expect that there will be. I expect that all of the names that they've released as potential recipients of these referrals will actually get them.
Are they going to name Donald Trump on Monday?
Do I think they will?
Yeah.
Yes. I think they're going to name Donald Trump, John Eastman, Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani. Yes. And I think that the Justice Department is going to do what it was going to do regardless of whether those criminal referrals happen.
And will they all stand up and then drop their mics simultaneously? Have they worked on this?
Look, I think it would be more surprising if they did not name all of these people than if they do name them, just because anybody who's been watching these hearings, and I know it's not that many people, but anybody who's been sort of watching the trajectory over time, the evidence is quite damning. The question is just whether these criminal referrals mean anything. And symbolically, they do, but they don't carry any sort of legal weight. So Merrick Garland has to decide what he's going to do and the extent to which his decision would be linked to the committee's recommendation is up for grabs. But my sense is, as I've said before, like, I bet that grand juries have already been convened. I think he's going to indict, and I think it'll be consistent with what the committee ultimately recommends.
Listen, I cannot doubt any prediction you make based on my track record versus your track record. But
I'm going to undo that record very soon, probably.
But on next week's call, we'll be getting the scoreboard out. Listen, thank you so much, Jennifer Lawless, Chair of the Political Science Department at the University of Virginia. For everybody else, stay tuned. Lots of things happening. Charlie Baker's going to run the NCAA. Interesting selection there. He won't be running for president. And GoLocal's got a number of updates on a number of big stories. So stay tuned. And if you haven't gotten your flu shot, you do not want to be in an emergency room in a Rhode Island hospital right now. Flu's up, COVID's up, RSV's still just treacherous for poor parents with small children. So get a flu shot, and also make sure you get that last vaccination. Shot number 5 matches up with the variants that are now swirling around. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you later today or tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.